A friend asked me this in March. He was 37. He made $180,000 a year. He wanted to know one number, just one. How much invested today sitting in dividend stocks would let him stop working? He'd done the math in his head. He thought the answer was around 2 million. He asked me to check. I checked. The answer wasn't one number, it was three. Tennessee, Texas, California. Same dividend, same dollar paid out. Three different numbers depending on where the dollar lands. By the end of this video, you'll know which of the three is yours and why your zip code sits inside the equation whether you put it there or not. Start with why there are three numbers and not one. A dividend looks like pure cash. Does it land in the account as pure cash? It doesn't. There are two haircuts taken before it lands in your pocket. The first haircut is federal. For a qualified dividend, the federal rate is 15% in the bracket most people in this conversation are sitting in. That part doesn't depend on where you live. The second haircut is state. And the state haircut isn't 15% or zero, it's something in between, and the rules are different in every state. Then there's a third layer, quieter than the other two, cost of living. The same $60,000 a year buys very different lives in three different places. You have to pick a place. The place picks a number. Set the goal at $60,000 a year in dividend income, net of federal and state tax, not gross, net. Money that hits the account and doesn't get pulled back out by April. $60,000 isn't extravagant. It's a paid-off house and steady groceries and a working car. Modest, quiet, enough to stop trading hours for paychecks. The number you need invested to produce that depends on the state. So I'll walk through them one at a time with real ETF yields and the actual state tax treatment. Tennessee first. Tennessee has no state income tax on wages. As of 2021, Tennessee also stopped taxing dividend and interest income. They repealed the Hall tax. So the dividend coming into a Tennessee account takes the federal 15% qualified rate and nothing else from the state. Look at the math on that. To net $60,000 after the federal qualified dividend tax, the gross dividend needs to be about $70,500. $70,500 a year in dividends coming in regular as a paycheck. What pays that out? Take a fund like the Schwab US Dividend Equity ETF, ticker SCHD. Its trailing yield over the last 2 years has run roughly 3.7%. It moves, but that's the neighborhood. 70,500 divided by 0.037 equals about 1,900,000. 1.9 million invested in SCHD at that yield produces 70,500 gross, which nets 60,000 after federal tax. That's the Tennessee number, about 1.9 million. My friend made the same calculation in his head and landed close. He was off by about 100,000. He'd forgotten the federal piece entirely. He thought 60,000 gross equaled 60,000 spent. I've watched most people forget the federal piece on the first pass. It hurts to remember on the second pass. A regular Wednesday in Nashville, on 1.9 million invested at 3.7%, the dividend hits the account in 4 chunks across the year. Quarterly distribution. The check shows up. You don't show up to work. That's the Tennessee picture. Now move the address across the state line, Tennessee to Texas. Texas also has no state income tax, same as Tennessee on the dividend itself, federal 15, state 0. So the number should be the same, shouldn't it? It isn't. Texas advertises no income tax as the headline, but Texas takes its money on the other side of the ledger. Property tax. Average effective property tax rate in Texas runs about 1.6 to 1.8% of assessed home value. Tennessee runs about 0.6%. On a $400,000 paid-off house, modest for both states, that's about $6,800 a year in Texas and about $2,400 a year in Tennessee, a spread of $4,400 a year, every year. The spread doesn't close. Then add homeowner insurance. If you've watched what's happened with property insurance in Texas the last 3 years, you already know. Hurricane belt, hail belt, freeze events. The premium on the same $400,000 house can run 3 to 5 times what it costs in Tennessee, $4,000 to $6,000 a year on top of property tax in some Texas zip codes. The line on the bill doesn't say tax. The line on the bill behaves like one. The structural cost just moved sideways into a line item that doesn't show up in a federal return. Two pockets, same hand. Most people don't notice because the headline says no income tax. The headline is true. The headline isn't the whole picture. I'll say this plainly. When I run this for someone considering a Tennessee to Texas move on the dividend strategy, the property tax delta alone covers about 8 months of groceries a year. To cover the property tax and insurance spread with dividend income, you need additional gross dividend of roughly $6,000 to $9,000 a year. At 3.7% yield, that's another $160,000 to $240,000 invested. So the Texas number for the same lifestyle sits between 2.05 and 2.15 million. Call it 2.1, about 200,000 more than Tennessee, for the same paid-off house, for the same 60,000 a year in your pocket. Hold the screen for a second. The next level is the one where most people stop watching because the count gets uncomfortable. We haven't hit California yet. California is the one where the state tax code reaches in past the federal cut and takes another piece on the way out. Like the video while you're here, subscribe to stay through to the level the others stop short of. California. Same dividend, same dollar. Does it land the same way? Now the math turns. Pull up your statement, find that line. What California does differently is right there in the schedule the California Franchise Tax Board publishes every year. The federal code gives qualified dividends a preferential rate, 15% for most of the people in this conversation. California state income tax code does not. California taxes qualified dividends as ordinary income at the regular state bracket. That's the part the financial press tends to skim over, and I think it deserves a fuller airing. A dividend in California is a paycheck in California, as far as Sacramento is concerned. At a $60,000 dividend income, single filer, no other earnings, the California marginal rate hits the 9.3% bracket. So the dividend dollar takes federal 15% on the first pass and California 9.3% on the second pass, on the same gross amount. That's roughly 24% total tax bite for someone whose only income is qualified dividends. To net $60,000 after a roughly 24% total bite, you need a gross dividend of about $79,000. $79,000 divided by 0.037 yields about $2.14 million invested. That's the California state tax number, before cost of living. The cost of living adjustment makes it worse. The same $60,000 a year that runs comfortably in Knoxville or San Antonio runs tight in San Diego and is at the threshold of poverty in San Francisco. To hold the same lifestyle in California as Tennessee, the target net moves up to closer to $90,000. Rerun the math on a $90,000 net target at the same federal and California rates, and you're looking at about $3.2 million invested. That's the real equivalent California number. $3.2 million for the same paid-off house and the same working car, about $1.3 million more than Tennessee. Take those three figures, add them up, or rather, shachma pick yours. Tennessee, 1.9 million. Texas, 2.1 million. California, 3.2 million. The dividend is the same. The geography is the variable. Now the part that matters more than the three numbers themselves. What does an advisor tend to suggest when a client walks in with the exact question this video started with? The client says, I want to live on dividends. The advisor's product menu, more often than not, contains three things designed to make that question feel sold at half the capital. The first is a covered call exchange traded fund. The two biggest are ticker JEPI and ticker JEPQ. Their distribution yields run between 7 and 10% in most years. On paper, that's twice SCHD. On paper, you need half the capital. The distribution shows up monthly. It looks like the answer. It isn't. The yield in those funds doesn't come entirely from dividends paid by the underlying stocks. A significant piece comes from option premium that the fund collects by selling away its upside. In a flat to up market, the underlying capital erodes against an index-only benchmark. The yield number on the screen is real. The wealth math under it is different from the wealth math under SCHD. Same word, yield, two different cash flows with two different shapes. The second is a master limited partnership, high-yield energy infrastructure plays. Distributions running 8 to 10%. The catch is the tax paperwork. MLP units issue a K1 tax form each year, often multi-state, often arriving in late March. If you retire to Tennessee and own units in a partnership operating in Texas and Oklahoma, you may owe Texas equivalent and Oklahoma filings depending on the partnership structure. The yield doesn't price the multi-state filing complication into the number on the screen. The third is a business development company. BDC funds lend to mid-market private companies. Yields run 9 to 11%. The yield comes from leverage and from credit spreads. When the credit cycle turns, and credit cycles turn, net asset value drops sharply. The 9% paid out in good years can pair with negative 25% capital in bad years. These aren't scans, they're products with specific use cases. The mistake isn't owning one. The mistake is treating the yield number printed at the top of the product page as if it's the same kind of number as a qualified dividend from a broad index fund. They're different cash flows with different risk shapes. The advisor who skips that part of the conversation is selling a yield number, not a retirement. This isn't theory, it's arithmetic. So back to the friend who asked me in March. He was 37. He made $180,000 a year. He wanted one number. He's a Tennessee man as it happens. Lives in Nashville. The 1.9 million is his number. He's not there yet. He's at 400,000. He's got about a decade left if his current contribution rate holds. If he were a Californian, the same decade gets him to the wrong number. Same person, same paycheck, same habit. Different state, different mountain. He'd be 60% of the way to Texas, 40% of the way to California. Same effort, different distance. That's the part the three-state question really teases out. You're not picking how much you need to live on dividends in the abstract. You're picking the geography that matches the number you can actually reach. If you can reach 1.9, Tennessee is open. If you can reach 2.1, Texas works. If 3.2 is in range, California is in range with it. Below 1.9, you're not below a number, you're below a map. You're picking the state earlier than the dollar. It moves one direction, no alternatives. The dividend doesn't care about your zip code. The federal code does, the state code does, the cost of groceries and rent does. And those three things stacked together are what stand between you and the day you stop trading time for the deposit. How much do you need invested to live off dividends and never work again? 3 answers. Pick the one that matches where you can actually get to, or pick the one that matches where you want to stay and rerun the math from there. I told my friend in March he had 2 ways forward. Get to 1.9 or move the question to a different state. He's working on the first one. If this breakdown landed, like the video, hit subscribe, tell me in the comments which of the 3 numbers is your number and how close you are. Net sum keeps the count going.